Imagine maxing out your credit cards, then opening new ones just to pay the minimums on the old ones. That's the US government. Except instead of Visa or MasterCard, it's the Federal Reserve and foreign bondholders. And instead of 20,000 in debt, it's 37 trillion and counting. Today we're going to take a look at what economists call the debt death spiral. The moment a country's debt grows faster than its economy can repay it. And the only way out is inflation, default, or collapse. Let's get into it. The debt death spiral happens when a government borrows not to build or invest, but simply to pay interest on old debt. Think of it like this. You owe $10,000 on a credit card. You can't pay it off, so you open a card and transfer the balance. Then another. Each time the interest piles up until your entire paycheck just goes towards paying the interest. That's the US right now, or very soon to be. In 2024, Washington collected 4.9 trillion in tax revenue, but spent about 6.5 trillion. Have to get the spending under control. It's ridiculous. Here's the kicker. Over 1 trillion of that went just to pay the interest on the national debt. That's like working all year and realizing an entire month's salary disappears just to cover your credit card bill, while the balance of the credit card bill just keeps climbing. For decades, Washington treated debt like it didn't matter. Wars, welfare, bailouts, stimulus checks. The bill always got pushed to later. But later is now. That's a bitch about time. Later eventually becomes now. That's how it works. Interest rates are no longer near zero. The US Treasury is rolling over cheap old debt into new expensive debt. That means the interest burden doubles or triples, even if spending doesn't rise. When interest rates were 1%, $1 trillion in new debt only cost 10 billion a year in interest. Now at 5%, it costs about 50 billion, 5 times more for the same amount borrowed. And since the US adds over 1 trillion in new debt about every 100 days, the math has turned lethal. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When debt grows faster than the economy, eventually every tax dollar gets eaten by interest payments. At that point, the government really only has 2 bad choices. 1, print money, which always seems to be the answer, which will destroy the currency through inflation. 2nd, default, and completely destroy the confidence in the US dollar. None of those are good options. That's the debt death spiral. More debt, higher interest rate, more borrowing, even higher interest rates. It's financial quicksand, and we're sinking fast. Picture the US government as a guy named Uncle Sam. He makes $4,900 a month, but he spends $6,500 a month, and he already owes $37,000 on his credit cards, and just applied for a new one to pay off last month's bill. The bank says, "Sure, Uncle Sam, but your credit score is slipping, so your new rate's 25%. So now he's using new debt to pay interest on old debt and calling it fiscal responsibility. That's not budgeting, that's delusion. And just like any credit card addict, the more he borrows, the faster the interest rates are going to eat him alive. Eventually, confidence breaks. Foreign investors stop buying US treasuries. The Fed steps in and prints money to buy the government's debt, which fuels more inflation. We're talking Weimar Germany. Inflation erodes the value of the dollar, forcing the Fed to print even more. That's the endgame, the system consuming itself to stay alive. The Austrian lens. Austrian economists warned about this decades ago. As Ludwig von Mises wrote, there is no means of avoiding the final collapse of a boom brought about by credit expansion. The alternative is only whether the crisis should come sooner as the result of voluntary abandonment of further credit expansion, or later as a final and total catastrophe of the currency system involved." End quote. We're living in that warning right now. Every dollar borrowed to pay for yesterday's mistakes brings us closer to the collapse itself. This isn't about politics, it's about math. Math doesn't negotiate. Unless the US radically changes course, cutting spending, ending the addiction to debt, and letting markets reset, the debt death spiral becomes permanent. Right now, the US is Neo on the train tracks, and Agent Smith is holding him, saying, "You hear that, US? That is the sound of inevitability." And the train coming down the tracks is the debt. We're about to get run over by it. But here is the truth. You can print dollars, but you cannot print trust. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you found any value, and I will see you in the next video.